I heard the laughter before I even turned around. Sharp, metallic, echoing through the wedding hall like someone had dropped a glass on marble. My fingers froze around my bouquet. And then I heard my son's voice too loud, too mocking, too cruel for this day. Mom, seriously? You married that old man? Every conversation in the hall collapsed into silence. My son stood there with his wife, both of them smirking as if they'd just caught me in some scandalous joke. Guests turned, heads swiveling, eyes narrowing, waiting to see whether I would break or explode. The old man, my husband, stood beside me, adjusting the cuff of his simple suit. He wasn't looking at anyone, not even me. He just stood there, still and calm, as if the world wasn't cracking open beneath my feet. But I felt the tremor. My son tilted his head, eyeing him from top to bottom like a piece of cheap furniture. Mom, he scoffed. He looks older than your father. This is embarrassing. Were you that desperate? His wife snorted. A few guests looked away in discomfort. A few whispered behind raised hands. A few didn't bother hiding their amusement. And then slowly, painfully slowly, my new husband lifted his eyes. He didn't glare. He didn't flinch. He didn't defend himself. He just looked at my son with an expression I couldn't read, an expression too controlled, too heavy, too knowing. I felt heat climbing up my throat. The humiliation burned so fiercely I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream at them, curse them, shake them, anything to make the laughter stop. But before I could utter a word, he gently touched my wrist. Don't, he whispered. Not yet, not yet. Those two words felt like a spark tossed into gasoline. My son crossed his arms. His wife rolled her eyes. And suddenly she said, loud, clear, venomous, imagine marrying someone who looks like he needs a nurse, not a wife. A few guests gasped. Someone choked back a laugh. Someone dropped their drink. And that was the moment something inside me cracked. Not broke, cracked, split right down the center, letting something fierce and cold slip through. The old man finally spoke. His voice was low, calm, but there was a weight in it that silenced even the ones whispering. Mock me if you want, he said quietly. But before this night ends, you will understand exactly why she chose me. My son frowned, confused. His wife blinked, thrown off balance, and the old man stepped forward. Just one step, but it shifted the entire atmosphere of the hall, like a storm was about to break. Like truths were coiling beneath the surface, like none of them had any idea what they had just triggered. I tightened my grip on my bouquet as my heartbeat slammed against my ribs. Because I knew something they didn't. This was only the beginning. And by the time the night ended, someone's world, maybe all of ours, would be destroyed. And as the old man looked my son in the eyes, I realized he finally recognized him. But my son's laughter faded into an uncomfortable hush as the old man stepped forward. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't defend himself. He didn't even seem bothered. But something in the way he stood, rooted, steady, made the air around him tighten like a drawn bowstring. My son's wife squinted at him, confused by the sudden shift. What's with the dramatic line? She said, arms crossed. Understand what exactly? He didn't answer. Instead, he turned to me, his expression softening for the first time that evening. Are you all right? He asked. I wasn't. Not even close. My pulse hammered, my cheeks burned, and humiliation clung to me like a second skin. But I nodded anyway. My son scoffed. Unbelievable. He's acting like some wise old guru. Mom, seriously, this is your wedding, not a retirement home audition. There it was again. That laughter, that sharp, careless cruelty. A few guests shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension crackling in the room. But others kept watching with almost hungry curiosity, waiting for drama, for a meltdown, for something worth whispering about later. The old man didn't react. He just looked at my son in a way I couldn't decipher. Gentle, almost sad, but with something else buried underneath. Something heavier. He took a deep breath. If you're done, he said quietly, there's something I need to say. That sentence, soft, almost fragile, somehow silenced the entire hall. Even the people at the far tables turned to listen. My son rolled his eyes. Oh, here we go. Another speech? Save it. We're all dying to know why someone your age is getting married instead of getting buried. The gasp that echoed through the hall was sharp enough to cut air. My bouquet nearly slipped from my hands. My lips parted, but no words came out. I felt myself shaking, not from embarrassment this time, but from something colder. The old man didn't flinch. He didn't lift a hand, didn't raise his voice, didn't show anger. He only closed his eyes for a brief moment, as if steadying himself against a pain no one else could see. Then he opened them, and the calmness was gone. Now there was weight. Serious weight, like a truth pressed against his tongue, ready to break loose. "You've mocked enough," he said softly, "but before this night ends, you will speak differently." My son blinked. "What's that supposed to mean?" The old man stepped closer, not threatening, not aggressive, but purposeful. "It means," he said, "you're laughing at a man you should have thanked years ago." My son froze. His wife's smirk fell. A ripple of confusion and unease swept across the room, and I felt the same shiver run through me, the same warning I'd felt only once before in my life, right before everything changed, because the old man's voice carried something no one expected: familiarity, recognition, and a truth ready to burn through every lie we had lived with. He wasn't just talking to my son. He was reminding him of something he didn't even know he'd forgotten. My son's confusion twisted into irritation. He stepped forward, jaw tight, chest puffed the way he used to stand when he wanted to look in control. "What are you talking about?" he demanded. "Thanked you for what? I don't even know you." The old man didn't answer immediately. He simply observed my son with a steady, almost heavy gaze, like he was looking at someone he recognized and didn't know whether to smile or grieve. My son's wife tugged his sleeve. "Maybe he's delusional," she muttered. "Old people say weird things. Let's just sit down." But the old man's voice cut through her sentence. "No," he said calmly. "I'm not confused. I know exactly who he is." The room stilled again. Every fork, every breath, every heartbeat seemed to pause. I swallowed hard. My throat felt too small, my pulse too loud. My son laughed, but it wasn't like before. It was thinner, forced. "Yeah? And who am I exactly?" The old man took a step closer, not threatening, not imposing, just inevitable. "You," he said softly, "are someone who once held my finger so tightly I thought it would break." A ripple of confusion spread through the hall. My son blinked once, twice. "What?" he whispered. His wife frowned. "Is this some creepy metaphor?" But the old man didn't look at her. He only looked at my son, with eyes full of something deeper than anger or sadness, something like old, buried affection mixed with an ache that had never fully healed. "You don't remember," he murmured. "Of course you don't. You were too young, too scared, too small." My son's lips parted, but no sound came out. Color drained from his face, not from recognition, but from the pressure of a truth brushing up against him, testing the walls he didn't know he had. The guests exchanged whispers. Someone shifted in their seat. Someone else leaned forward as if watching the first tremor before an earthquake. My son finally broke the silence. "Mom!" he said sharply. "What is this? What is he talking about?" His voice was different now. No mocking, no arrogance. Just raw, rising panic. I opened my mouth, but my husband raised a hand slightly. "Let me," he said. His voice was gentle but heavy, like a man lifting something fragile and painful at the same time. He looked at my son again, and this time there was no hiding the emotion in his eyes. "I carried you," he said. "I protected you. I kept you alive when the world you were born into tried to take you away." A collective gasp trembled through the hall. My son stepped back, as if the words had pushed him. He stammered. I don't know what you're talking about." The old man nodded slowly, almost sympathetically. "You will," he replied. His voice was soft, but somehow louder than anything else in the room. "You will remember, or I will remind you. Because tonight, the truth is coming whether you want it or not." My son's hand tightened around the back of a chair. His wife stared at the old man like he was speaking another language. The guests were silent, as if afraid any sound might break whatever fragile thread held the room together. And next to me, My husband quietly exhaled, bracing himself, because the next words would shatter everything. He wasn't revealing the truth yet. He was just opening the first door. And behind the next one waited a memory that would hit my son like a falling world. My son stood rooted to the spot, one hand gripping the back of a chair so tightly his knuckles whitened. His eyes remained fixed on the old man, blinking rapidly, as if trying to force clarity into a situation that kept getting darker instead of clearer. "What do you mean you kept me alive?" he snapped, his voice cracking on the last word. "Alive from what?" "From Weicho." The old man didn't answer. Not immediately. He simply held my son's gaze, shoulders squared, expression steady in a way that made even the boldest guests shrink back. My son's wife stepped forward, desperately trying to regain control of the moment. "This is ridiculous," she said with an uneasy laugh. "Can someone explain why this stranger thinks he's part of your family history?" Her voice echoed louder than she intended. A few guests shifted in discomfort. Someone whispered, "What if it's true?" The old man lifted his hand slightly, just a small, quiet gesture, but it silenced the room more effectively than a shout. Then he spoke. "You asked who I am," he said to my son. "The real question is, who were you? And what did you survive before you even learned to speak?" A wave of cold rolled up my spine. My son's expression twisted, confusion mixing with irritation, panic, and the beginnings of fear. "Stop talking in riddles," he burst out. "Just say it. Say whatever dramatic thing you're trying to say." The old man stepped closer. One step. Calm. Controlled. But with a weight that made the floor feel thinner beneath us. "I will," he said softly. "But not yet. You're not ready to hear the name of what tried to destroy you. Not while you're laughing at the man who fought it." My son swallowed hard. His wife opened her mouth, then closed it. She had nothing left to say. The guests were silent now. You could hear breaths, shaky and uneven. You could feel hearts pounding in bodies, trying not to show fear. My son's voice came out quieter this time. "You fought something for me?" The old man's eyes didn't waver. "For both of you." A chill ran through the hall, like someone had opened a door to winter. But my son still tried to push back. He needed something to hold on to, even if it was his anger. "You're lying," he whispered. "I would know. I'd remember something like that." A small, sad smile touched the old man's lips. "You were too young to remember," he said, "but old enough to be scarred." My son froze. My breath caught. A few guests covered their mouths in shock. "What? What scar?" my son asked, voice trembling. The old man lifted a hand toward him, not to touch, not yet, but to point somewhere specific. "On your left shoulder," he murmured. "Under the skin, a mark that shouldn't be there. Something no one ever explained to you." My son's jaw dropped. His wife's face drained of color. "How do you know about that?" he whispered. "I've never shown anyone, not even—" His voice broke. The old man didn't move, didn't speak, didn't need to. He already knew the question forming in my son's mind. He already knew the answer. Because he had been there. And in the next moment, the old man would say something that would rip the ground out from under my son's feet. And mine. My son's breathing grew shallow, each inhale sharp and brittle. His hand hovered near his left shoulder, as if he could shield the truth from reaching him. The guests watched him with wide, unblinking eyes, some stunned, some horrified, some whispering prayers under their breath. "How?" he whispered. "How do you know about that mark? Nobody knows. Nobody." The old man finally moved, but only to place both hands gently behind his back, his posture calm and unshaken. If anything, he looked like a man preparing to carry a weight he had carried once before. "You're wrong," he said softly. "Two people have always known, you and me." My son stumbled backward, knocking into a chair. His wife grabbed his arm to steady him, but he barely noticed her touch. "What are you saying?" His voice cracked. How could you possibly?" His breath hitched again. He was afraid. Not of the old man's age. Not of the wedding. Not of embarrassment. He was afraid of the possibility, terrifying, impossible, yet undeniable, that the old man wasn't lying. That he did know something no stranger should ever know. My lips trembled. I wanted to step in, to calm him, to protect him from the storm that was rising. But my feet refused to move. I stood rooted, caught between the son I raised and the man whose truth was about to break us both. The old man took another step closer. "When you were a child," he said quietly, "you screamed every night from pain you didn't understand. Sometimes you shook so violently, I had to wrap my arms around you to keep you from hurting yourself." My son's wife gasped. Guests murmured, glancing at him with new, fearful curiosity. My son's face twisted, anger, confusion, and desperation colliding at once. "That's not true," he said, voice trembling. No one ever told me. I never had." His voice faded. He didn't need to finish the sentence. His eyes said everything. But why do I feel like he's telling the truth? Why does something inside me hurt? Why does something old and buried feel like it's waking up? The old man's expression softened. Not pity, not sadness, but something painfully gentle. "You didn't know," he said. "You couldn't know. You were too little. But I was there." "No," my son breathed. "No, no, no. This is insane. Why would I believe some stranger with a story about my childhood?" The old man lowered his voice, each word heavy with unspoken history. "Because I wasn't a stranger then." Silence slammed into the room. My son stared at him, his mouth slightly open, his eyes trembling like he was staring at a ghost wearing human skin. "What?" he whispered, voice barely audible. "What are you saying?" The old man took one final step, close enough now that my son couldn't look anywhere else. "You want the truth?" he asked softly. His voice didn't rise. It didn't waver. It simply landed. "Look into my eyes. Look. Properly. Tell me you don't recognize the man who carried you out of hell." A chair fell over somewhere behind us. Someone gasped. Someone whispered a prayer. My son's knees nearly buckled. His wife grabbed him again, this time with fear in her eyes. I felt the room spin, the floor shifting, my throat closing, as the moment I had dreaded for years finally arrived. The old man wasn't hinting anymore. He wasn't circling the truth. He was opening the door. Slowly, deliberately, with the kind of pain only someone who had lived through the fire could carry. And the next words he would speak would change who my son believed he was. Forever. The word outside kept echoing in my head long after the stranger vanished. But the part that haunted me more was the footsteps. Those quiet, steady footsteps that didn't belong to him. Or to me. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt someone watching me, like a presence pressed against the back of my neck. Around 2 a.m., I heard it again. A single sharp knock. Not on the front door, not on the window, but on the basement door. I froze. My husband always kept that door locked. Always. He said the basement was unfinished, dangerous, full of wiring. He had 100 excuses, each one more suspicious than the last. The knock came again. Not loud, not aggressive, just deliberate. Like whoever, or whatever, was behind it, knew I was awake. My throat tightened. "Hello," I whispered, even though my voice trembled so much the word barely came out. No answer, just breathing, slow, heavy, and definitely human. I stepped backward, but the floor creaked. And the second it did, the breathing suddenly stopped. Then, the doorknob turned. Very slowly, very gently, as if the person inside didn't want to open it. They wanted me to. I bolted to my bedroom, locked the door, and pressed my back against it, chest pounding so hard it hurt. I didn't hear footsteps following. I didn't hear the basement door open. I didn't hear anything at all. Just silence. A silence so thick it felt alive. But when the sun finally rose, I found something on the floor right outside the basement door. Something that nearly made me scream. A note, written in my husband's handwriting. 4 words. 4 words that made my blood turn cold. "Do not let her out. Her, not him." And suddenly, I realized something terrifying. Whoever knocked last night wasn't the stranger. It was the person my husband had been hiding from me. Or worse, the person he had been hiding in our home. If the note wasn't the scariest part, what I found beside it, the small blood-stained object, made me question whether my husband was protecting me or protecting her from me. The note alone was enough to make my hands shake, but the object lying beside it nearly made me drop to my knees. A small hair tie, black, frayed. But what froze me wasn't the object itself. It was the strand of hair wrapped around it. Long, wavy, jet black. And stuck to it, a tiny, dried smear of blood. My breath hitched. That wasn't mine. I didn't recognize it. I didn't want to recognize it. But every instinct in my body whispered the same thing. She had been here recently. Close. Too close. I reached for the hair tie, hesitating, terrified it might still be warm, when I noticed something else. Something even more unsettling. A fingerprint in the dust on the basement door. Small, delicate, but smeared downward, as if someone had been dragging their hand while being pulled away. Suddenly, the house felt darker, colder. Wrong. I backed away, but my elbow hit the wall light switch, and for the first time, I saw it clearly. The basement door wasn't just locked, it had deep scratch marks around the frame. Thin marks, like fingernails. Some old, some fresh, some with dried blood still caught in them. I covered my mouth as my stomach twisted. No unfinished wiring, no renovation, no excuse. Something, or someone, had been trying to get out. And my husband, he knew. He locked her in. He left notes about her. He kept the key hidden. My mind raced, desperate to make sense of it. Was she dangerous? Was she hurt? Was she someone he was protecting? Or someone he was trapping? My heart banged against my ribs as a new thought formed. A horrible one. What if the stranger outside wasn't warning me about something my husband hid, but warning me about what my husband did? I looked at the hair tie again. It wasn't dusty. It wasn't old. It looked like it had been dropped last night. And then, from behind the basement door, a sound, soft, fragile, broken. A whisper. A whisper that didn't sound angry. It sounded afraid. Please, don't leave me here. My blood turned to ice, because the voice wasn't a woman's. It sounded like a child. And when I finally worked up the courage to check the hidden camera my husband thought I didn't know about, the footage showed something that made my heart collapse. A tiny hand reaching out of the basement in the middle of the night. My hands were trembling so violently I could barely tap the screen. I didn't want to see it. I needed to see it. The hidden camera wasn't something I installed. It was something he installed. A tiny lens tucked behind a decorative vase near the living room. Easy to miss unless you cleaned obsessively like I did. And for months, I thought it was just a reflection from the glass. Until last night, when I noticed the faint red blink. I opened the security app he didn't know I had access to, one I found only because he forgot to log out once. The footage loaded. For a second, all I saw was my quiet, dark living room. Then, movement. Slow. Cautious. Barely there. A small hand, pale and thin, reached from behind the basement door. The same basement he told me never to enter. The fingers curled around the edge. Trembling. Not tapping. Not knocking. Reaching. Desperate. My chest tightened painfully. The little hand stretched out as if trying to touch something. Or someone. Just out of frame. I froze when I saw the wrist. Covered in bruises. Dark. Ugly. Fresh. My throat burned. Then, a second figure appeared. My husband. He stepped into the frame with the calmness of someone entering his garden, not someone facing a terrified child. He crouched down, speaking softly to the hand. But the audio was off, and his tone looked too gentle. Fake gentle, practiced gentle, predatory gentle. He placed something on the floor, a bowl, a glass, food, water, like you'd leave for a dog. The tiny hand snatched the bowl so fast it tipped, and my husband jolted, fists clenching, jaw locking. That calm, fatherly face split for a second into something sharp, cruel, cold, and then, with one harsh motion, he slammed the basement door shut. So hard the camera shook. The child's scared whimper echoed even without audio. I covered my mouth, choking back panic. Who was that child? Why was he hiding them? And why were they acting like they'd been trapped down there for days? Maybe longer? I scrubbed back through the footage. Night after night, the same routine. Food, water, whispers, fear. But then I noticed something else. Sometimes, the basement door moved before he arrived. Not opening, just shaking slightly, as if someone inside was bracing themselves for what was coming. And then another clip. A clip that made my blood stop moving. My husband wasn't always alone in the footage. Someone else appeared in the doorway behind him one night. A woman, long hair, black, wavy. The same hair from the tie I found. She didn't speak. She didn't move much. But her eyes looked straight into the camera, as if she knew I'd find this someday. And then she mouthed something. One word. One warning. Run! The screen blurred as tears filled my eyes. But before I could breathe, the last frame of the clip loaded. A shot of the child's hand slipping from under the basement door. And on its palm was something written in black marker. One sentence. And it was my name. But nothing, not the footage, not the warning, not the child, prepared me for what I found when I finally forced open that basement door. Because the first person I saw down there wasn't a child at all. It was someone I thought was dead. The moment my name flashed across that tiny, trembling palm, something inside me snapped. Fear didn't disappear. It transformed. Into determination. Into fury. Into the kind of strength you only find when you realize someone helpless is calling specifically for you. I wiped my face, grabbed the spare key he thought he hid too well, and marched toward the basement door. Every step felt heavier, like the house itself was warning me to turn back. But I didn't. Not this time. My fingers shook as I fitted the key into the lock. The cold metal felt alive, like it knew what secrets it held back every day. I twisted. The lock clicked louder than it should have. The sound crawled through my bones. I opened the door. A warm, stale breath of air rushed at me, carrying something thick and metallic. Blood? No, not quite. Something older. Something like fear that had been trapped too long. My hand fumbled along the wall until it found a light switch. It flickered once, twice, then blazed on. And my entire world tilted, because the first person I saw wasn't a child at all. It was a woman, thin, hollow-cheeked, eyes too large for her fragile face, wrists wrapped in faded bandages. Hair, long, black, and wavy, matted against her shoulders like she'd been sweating through nightmares. She looked at me as if I were a hallucination. Her lips parted, trembling. You're real. My throat dried. My mind refused to process. My knees nearly buckled. Because I knew that face. I had cried over that face, buried her picture, begged life to give me one more chance with her. It was my husband's first wife. The woman he told me died in an accident. The woman he claimed to mourn every year. The woman whose grave I had visited with him. She was alive. Down here. Breathing. Barely. And in the corner, behind her, crouched a small figure. A child. No older than 6 or 7. His eyes were sunken but bright, burning with a fear he'd learned too young. He stood slowly, clutching a small blanket, and whispered, "Mom, is she the one who left the food upstairs?" My chest shattered. He wasn't asking her, he was asking me. And then footsteps, above us. Slow, measured, heavy, coming toward the basement door. My blood iced over. He was home. The woman grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. Her nails dug into my skin as she whispered fiercely, "Don't say a word. Don't breathe. And whatever you do, don't let him close that door." But it was already too late. The basement door creaked. The footsteps stopped. A shadow stretched across the top step. Then his voice, calm, gentle, practiced, floated down. "Sweetheart, why is the basement open?" Because when he finally stepped into the light, I saw something in his hand that made me realize he hadn't come down to talk. He came down to make sure none of us ever left that basement alive. His silhouette filled the doorway, stretching down the stairs like a blade ready to drop. But it wasn't the shadow that made my lungs collapse. It was the object he held in his right hand. A thick metal baton, not a tool, not an accident, a weapon. One meant for silence, not warning. He tapped it lightly against his leg as he descended the first step. Clink, second step, clink, third step. Closer, louder, deadlier. The woman, his first wife, the ghost brought back to flesh, pressed the child behind her and mouthed silently, "He'll kill us." My body stiffened. My heartbeat thrashed so violently it felt like the sound would give us away, but he already knew. He wasn't surprised to see the door open. He wasn't confused. He wasn't even angry. He looked relieved. Relieved that the moment he'd spent years preparing for had finally come. He took another step, and the light hit his face. That gentle, trustworthy face I'd woken up beside, confided in, loved. But now, it didn't look human. His smile was soft, warm, practiced, but his eyes, cold, flat, soulless, contradicted every curve of it. "Sweetheart," he said, voice dripping with tenderness that made my skin crawl. "I told you the basement was dangerous for you. You should have trusted me." The woman clutched my hand, hard. Her nails bit into my palm. The boy trembled, his small fingers digging into his mother's shirt. My husband's steps slowed. He was close enough now that I could see the faint splatters on the baton. Old stains. Dark. Dried. Silent witnesses to every story he'd buried down here. "Come upstairs," he said softly. "We'll talk. Talk." That word felt like poison, because his eyes weren't looking at me. They were scanning the room, checking corners, counting bodies, evaluating threats. And then, he saw her, his first wife, the woman he promised was long dead. His smile flickered, like a glitch, like a mask slipping. But then he smoothed it again, twisting it into a wounded, betrayed expression. "Why?" he whispered. "Would you show yourself now?" Her chin lifted, even though her whole body shook. "I didn't show myself," she rasped. "She found me." He shifted his eyes back to me, and the gentle tone vanished. "You weren't supposed to open that door." His grip tightened around the baton. My breath froze. One more step, and he'd be close enough to strike. And there was no way I could protect both her and the child. The woman leaned to my ear, whispering so quietly her lips barely moved. "Distract him. 10 seconds. That's all I need." "What for?" I mouthed. Her eyes hardened with a rage that must have been fermenting for years. "To end him." My husband took another step. Slow, deliberate, hungry. His voice was quiet, but every word felt like a blade against my throat. "I forgive you for this mistake, sweetheart. Truly. But you need to come. Upstairs now. All of you." The baton lifted. His smile thinned. The woman's grip tightened around my wrist, a silent signal. 10 seconds. My mind raced. He was stronger, faster, prepared. We had fear. He had control. Unless I broke his control. I stepped forward. Just one step. But enough to make him pause. He wasn't expecting that. "Wait!" I whispered. His head tilted. Good. He was curious. I forced my voice not to shake. "If you want me, you'll have to take me." His eyes widened. With triumph. He lifted the baton, but before he could swing, the child stepped out of the shadows and said something that made my husband freeze midair. "Dad, please don't hurt her this time." The baton stopped inches from my face. Not because he chose mercy, but because the small, trembling voice behind me cut through the basement like a crack of lightning. "Dad, please don't hurt her this time." Everything in me turned to stone. "Dad?" The word shattered against the walls. It echoed through every lie, every smile, every soft, practiced sentence he had ever used on me. My husband didn't turn around. He didn't blink. He just froze. like the word struck some hidden nerve buried deep under all the polished charm and rehearsed kindness. The boy stepped forward, his thin fingers clutching his blanket with the kind of desperation only a child raised in fear could understand. His voice quivered. You said, you said she wouldn't end up like Mommy." The woman sucked in a sharp breath. She reached for her son's arm, terrified he'd said too much. But it was too late. My husband's mask cracked. I saw it. A twitch in his jaw, a flicker in his eyes, a quiet, collapsing rage. Then he turned, slowly, toward the boy. "Eli," he said quietly, "go back to the corner." The tone. God. The tone. Cold. Hard. A controlled storm. The kind a child never disobeys. But Eli didn't move. He shook his head. "But she opened the door," he whispered. She came for us. Dad, please, please don't be mad." Something inside my husband fractured. He didn't yell, he didn't hit, he didn't strike with the baton. What he did was worse. He smiled, a soft, almost fatherly smile. "Come here, Eli." The woman, his real wife, the one he'd kept hidden, practically lunged forward. "No!" she hissed. "He's not touching him again." My husband snapped his head toward her with a sudden, sharp, monstrous reflex that made the boy whimper. "Stay out of this," he barked. "You ruined everything the moment you opened your mouth." She stepped in front of her son, shaking so badly I could hear her bones click. "I ruined everything," she spat. "You locked us in here. You told the world I was dead. You made my child afraid of his own breath." The woman's voice was trembling fury. But my husband's silence was more terrifying. He wasn't angry at her words. He was calculating, measuring, selecting his next move. His eyes slid to me. "You don't understand what she was like," he said, voice dripping fake sorrow. "You don't know what she's capable of. You don't know what I saved you from." He took another step. The baton gleamed. Sweat dripped down my back. He had stopped pretending, stopped disguising. The man in front of me wasn't a victim. He wasn't a widower. He wasn't a loving husband. He was a predator who believed his actions were justified, no matter who he had to break, bury, or silence. He lifted the baton again. "I'm not letting you ruin this marriage too," he whispered. "Not again." My skin crawled. "Again?" I choked. "What are you talking about?" His smile stretched too wide, too thin. "Don't you get it? Every woman who enters my life tries to leave." He raised the baton. The woman grabbed her son. I braced myself, but then a sound cut through the basement like a blade slicing air. A click. Metal. Cold. Steady. Right behind us. The woman's eyes widened in terror. The boy's breath hitched. I turned slowly, and what I saw made all the blood drain from my body. Someone else was standing at the bottom of the stairs. A person I never expected. A person who shouldn't have been here. A person holding something far more dangerous than my husband's baton. A gun. And her voice trembled as she aimed it straight at him. "I warned you," she whispered. "You should have listened when I told her you made an irreversible mistake." It was the stranger from the wedding, but when she revealed who she really was, and what she knew about my husband, the truth hit me harder than any weapon ever could. Because the monster in my basement wasn't the only secret he had been hiding. The stranger's hands shook as she pointed the gun at him, but her eyes were steady, focused, full of a fury that had been carried for years, maybe decades. My husband's smile finally cracked. "You," he whispered, like seeing a ghost he had buried with his own bare hands. "This isn't possible." The stranger didn't blink, didn't breathe, didn't lower the gun. "Oh, it's possible," she rasped. "You just never expected to see me alive enough to expose you. Alive. Enough." My stomach twisted. My husband took a cautious step backward. The baton trembled in his hand. "Don't do this," he hissed. "You don't know what she's capable of." But she ignored him and turned those burning eyes on me. "I tried to warn you at the wedding," she said softly, But you walked away before I could finish. My throat tightened. I... I didn't understand. She nodded. You weren't meant to. Yet. Then she looked back at him. Her voice sharpened. Drop the baton. Something primal flickered in his eyes. The urge to lunge, to silence, to win. Instead, he laughed. A low, chilling laugh. You think I'm afraid of you? After everything? Her jaw clenched. He took one step toward her. And she fired. Not at him. At the wall beside his head. The bullet tore a chunk of concrete free, showering him with dust. His entire body jolted in shock. I'm not here to scare you, she said. I'm here to end this. He raised his hands slowly. Fine, he spat. You want the truth? I'll give you the truth. He pointed at me, furious, trembling. She was going to leave me. Just like the first one, just like you. He snarled at the woman holding the gun. You women never appreciate what I do for you. For us, she corrected. Not for us. To us. She stepped forward. And then she said the words that changed everything. I'm your sister. My breath caught. My husband's face drained of color. Real fear slashed across his features. Don't you dare, he whispered. Don't you dare tell her. But she didn't stop. You think he just lied to you? She said to me. No, he's been lying to everyone his entire life. The room pulsed. The air tightened. He hurt me first, she said. When I was a teenager, he locked me away, said I was dangerous, said he was protecting the family. Her voice cracked. He kept me hidden so long our parents thought I ran away. I covered my mouth. The woman, his first wife, clutched her son as tears streamed silently down her face. Her body shook with the realization that she wasn't the first victim. She might not have been the last. My husband snapped. That's enough! He lunged toward her, but I stepped forward instinctively, shoving him back with a force I didn't know I had. He stumbled, shocked, and the stranger, the sister, didn't hesitate. She moved past me, grabbed the baton he'd dropped, and smashed it across his knee with a scream years in the making. He fell, hard. The ground shook with the impact. The sister stood over him, chest heaving, eyes burning with righteous fury. This ends today, she whispered. But then, the boy. Little Eli. Tiny, terrified Eli. He walked forward, slowly, quietly. He looked down at the man who had trapped him since birth. The man he'd been forced to call Dad. The man who had defined fear for him. Eli's voice was barely audible. You told me monsters weren't real, he whispered, but you are one. The sentence broke the basement open, broke the spell, broke the years of silence. My husband finally stopped fighting. Police sirens wailed in the distance, finally arriving, thanks to the sister who had called them before coming down. He didn't resist. Not anymore. He knew it was over. He knew he was done. He looked at me one last time as the officers dragged him up the stairs. I gave you everything, he hissed. You would have left me too. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Because the truth was simple. I wasn't leaving a husband. I was escaping a cage. Hours later, after the statements, the chaos, the questions that felt like needles, I stood outside the house. The sister approached me, eyes softer now, no weapon in her hand, no fire in her voice. I'm sorry, she whispered. I should have stopped him years ago. I shook my head. No, you saved us. Her eyes filled with tears. For the first time, I wasn't too late. The boy tugged at my sleeve, his voice small, hopeful, brave. Can we go now? He asked. I knelt. Yes, I said, wiping his cheek gently. You're free now. The woman, his mother, rested a hand on my shoulder. I don't know why you opened that door, she said, voice trembling with gratitude. But you saved our lives. I looked at the house one last time, the place that had almost become my grave, the same place where I found the strength to rewrite my fate. I opened it, I whispered, because someone needed me to. Not someone strong, not someone loud, someone small, someone scared, someone writing my name on his palm in the dark. Sometimes strength doesn't come from the battles you fight, but from the doors you choose to open, even the ones you're told to fear. And sometimes, the bravest thing you'll ever do is save someone else while you're still learning how to save yourself. In the end, the monster didn't break us, the truth set us free. If this story touched your heart, hit like and subscribe for more stories that feel like real life. Your one request can become my next story. Just tell me what life has taught you.